and John showed this too, is Imidan is excellent. This is really the excellent material. It has such a nice contact effect on the adults, and it really comes out in excellent every trial. And you'll see again in this year's trial, which I'll show here for the first time, same thing. We also, in the past years, have gotten really good results with this Harvanta, this new diamide that's, I'll show you in another slide, is now finally registered and ready. And also our data has tended to show that Delegate doesn't rate as an excellent material for us pretty consistently in these trials, but a good material, but not the residual and not the excellent effect of the others. And also we've gotten pretty good results with Exerol in our trials with these different trials that we run. So that's kind of what we get out of this. So as we run all these trials at Trevor Nichols, we try to change things up. And here is the trial from this year, which has some interesting results in it that I thought you might enjoy seeing, though I'm not making recommendations from these results. Again, what you see is that Imidan was excellent material for SWD, and most of the other materials that we did, like a combination that included Delegate, Grandivo, and this is Verdepryn, which is Harvanta, the name now for tree fruit. We're kind of in between. They look pretty good, but this was tremendous SWD pressure in our plots last year. Huge numbers of SWD, so we're really trying to control this excessive population. But a couple of them, probably the most interesting thing, if you catch up on this, is we ran a program with Lorsban and Imidan. This is a foliar application of Lorsban for SWD, which was suggested that we give it a try. And in this particular program, it was Lorsban on July 1st and 15th, and then Imidan in between. So it went Lorsban, Imidan, Lorsban. This was the best treatment in all of the programs, a combination of Lorsban and Imidan, which, unbeknownst to me until we did this, I looked on the label, and you actually can apply this at 1.5 pounds 8 times if you wanted to, which is pretty shocking to me. But you couldn't do it actually because it has a 14-day PHI, so that would make it a little difficult for SWD. But you have Imidan that you're using at that timing. This might be another option at that super good timing of a couple of weeks before harvest. You also see that we looked at this Jet Egg product that you might have heard about, this sanitizer that apparently works to control SWD by probably, we don't know exactly, but by killing the yeast, natural yeast that are out there that it needs to get its eggs to develop. And they've gotten pretty good results with this in blueberries. We get about this result. We've tested it 3 times now, and under really high pressure every time, and we get about a 60% impact or something, 50%. We also looked at this spear T peptide at a high and a low rate. This is a new material being developed in Michigan. This is a spider venom peptide that looked about like the other materials like Verdepryn and Grandivo this year. Had some activity, which would surprise us, but it's nice to see, but it wasn't excellent. So if you look at all the materials and the guides we've given you, this is really what you have available as excellent. Danitol, Exerol, Imidan, Mustang Max, and Warrior as your best options for excellent control of SWD. You also have now Cyclaniliprole, or the trade name Verdepryn, although you can tell me more than I know because it was actually registered last year, but everybody tells me you couldn't get it. So whether you can get it this year or not is not up to me. I hope you can get it, and I hope the price is reasonable. So it has a registration. It actually was registered last year. Controls SWD, cherry fruit fly, plum curculio, and leaf roller. So it really would be a nice fit into your programs in cherry. And I don't know why the label's in there sideways and backwards. It wasn't before, but now it is. Okay, when, maybe it's how I felt last night at 10 o'clock. When to start treating for SWD, I think, is the key decision. And so I wanted to put a little energy into that this year, of when to treat. And I think sort of the thinking was that if you didn't start too early, you could keep the cost down. And because of the stuff that we've been doing with Nikki, I think somewhere between 540 and 650 is a pretty reasonable start, although I think you could even go later than that, but we need to keep working to see if that's the case from full bloom and keeping those 7-day intervals. And I just put the bottom figure down there again to remind you that not starting too early is a good thing. So people are kind of keep talking about first catch, and I caught flies, I'm ready to treat. Here's 2017, I think. Yeah, 2017. Here's the first catch in the northern counties, central counties, southern counties, way out here. And here's when SWD and the fruit are susceptible, like about right here. So you could save a lot of sprays by paying attention to actually the development of the fruit and what's actually happening, rather than saying, oh, I caught my first fly, I don't need to pay any attention anymore. It doesn't work out quite that simply. So I actually ran a trial this year, and I'm showing for the first time with John at Trevor Nichols to take a look at taking out that first spray. And we didn't get perfect data, but I think this pretty much shows the story. It's a small plot field trial, so you always have a little variation. But here's the way this works. So we put on Verdepryn, this new diamide that's now registered. And what we did is we had one spray right before the sample, the harvest sample. We had 2 sprays, which would have been then, plus a week before that. And then we would have 3 sprays starting about 3 weeks before we did this infestation sample and harvest. And then we had one where we sprayed early, 4 sprays. So we sprayed like 4 or 5 days before the first spray in this one. And you can see that, yes, you need, this tells us, 1, you need all the sprays, at least 3. If you waited too long, you got infestation. But you didn't need this other spray. It would have been nice if this was down here, but it moved, this is just natural variation in the plot, but really it goes like this. And this tells me that that first spray early, before there is any chance they could really infest that fruit, would have been a spray you don't need. So I think you can be really careful about your timings and maybe save a spray. So if you look at all the other trials that we've been through over time, looking at these, so there was a group of us, Nikki and Karen and myself, and at that time Mike Haas was my technician. We did a program where we took 9 control programs and an untreated check, and we took excellent compounds like Imidan, and we put them in different combinations, focusing on when to put in the ones with the short PHI, the ones with a 7-day PHI, and when could you start, and did tank mixing help you? And we did 2 fruit collections, and then we took 3-gallon samples of fruit. And I know in this thing you get tired of data, so I threw the data out, and I just gave you the summary of what we found from this study. What we found is that the most effective programs relied on Imidan 10 to 14 days before harvest. So that optimum best material that you have was best used at that 10 to 14 day timing. And those were the 3 different programs where we used it, and they were the best programs. The final, if you put a final spray that had a 3-day PHI before harvest, you had the least risk of getting infestation. And tank mixes look pretty good to get longer activity. So in this one trial where we tried this, we got a little bit extended spray intervals by putting on tank mix of these different combinations, Mustang Max and Urbana, or Mustang Max and Imidan. So putting on some good materials in a tank mix extended. And finally, if you put a pyrethrid on and you expected more than 7 days of activity, you were in trouble. You were going to get infestation. And then this group of people actually went on farm at 25 different farms. So Emily, Mike, Dave Jones, the group up here went to orchards, 10 in the Northwest, 10 in West Central, and 5 in the Southwest, monitored adults, assessed fruit injury, and then got spray records. And out of that, we made some recommendations that I'm just reminding you of now again. So I'll show you the ones from the Southwest that I did with Mike and kind of what we learned from them. All you really need to know from this, I think, is in yellow. So here you've got the flight of the fly in blue across the region, and then you got Mike Haas put rainfall in here with the orange ones to look at the effect of precipitation in these plots. And then the different treatments are given with the red arrow at the time that they were treated. In this case, mostly Imidan. So if you look at this one, we had low activity from SWD best on catches. We had short spray intervals, and we used a highly effective material. We did, the grower did, and Imidan, and had a treatment in there of malafine close to harvest, got no injury. So That's a program that worked well. Here's one that didn't work. One that didn't work had low captures again, so not a huge population, but extended spray intervals beyond the week and a reliance on some pyrethroids as part of that program. More reliance on pyrethroids than were effective. This one had damage at harvest. If you look at another one that worked well without SWD larvae at harvest, you had extended spray intervals, which could be problematic, but you didn't have very high SWD pressure, and you used Imidan, the most effective material, and you got away with it, and you had excellent control, relying only on the most effective material. One where you got damage again, you had high captures of spotted wing Drosophila, you extended the grower extended their spray intervals, even though they used effective compounds, they had extended spray intervals and a pretty high population, and they had larvae detected at harvest. So the bottom line of all that is, suggestions for you is, I think you need to start your program on catch and traps and degree days. Really pay attention to the new information that we have. I think you can save some money. You need to rely on highly effective materials pretty much only, and you need that, I think that treatment at 10 to 14 days before harvest is really a critical one to not mess around with. You need to retreat after a significant rain event following the advice of John. And if you really want to take no chances, that 3-day PHI spray before harvest is a really good one. Finally, when the work Nikki's done, you need full covers out. I wanted to end by emphasizing again, there's a lot of interest. Since I'm up here, I get to give my biases. There's a lot of interest. These traps are kind of a pain. There's no question about it. And everybody wants it. As soon as you catch a few flies and you're moving along, everybody says, well, you don't need the traps anymore. I think the data from our on-farm work, especially in stuff Mike did in the Southwest, suggests that's not necessarily the case. You have some, it will benefit you some to keep trapping in your orchard if you have the energy to do it. And the reason is, I think they tell you something about the pressure you have, and they can tell you something about the program you need. So for example, I showed these two. So this is efficacy, saying it may impact your program. So the one on the top, which I might already show you, but I want to emphasize, it had low spotted wing Drosophila captures. They extended their spray interval, saved some money. They got control. They knew they had low pressure because Mike was monitoring for them. They got away with it. They knew something about how intense the pressure was from SWD. The bottom one had very high SWD. Not paying attention to that, they used extended spray intervals and got hammered by SWD, knowing, I mean, now we know they had high pressure and they couldn't get away with extended spray intervals. So you got an opportunity, I think, that trapping does more than just tell you they're there, it's time to treat. I think you can, I'm one of the few that still thinks trapping is important. And then I borrow a slide to end that Emily put together, which basically, I think you need to carefully consider the trade-off between efficacy and cost, emphasizing that it's best not to be using a pyrethroid at that most critical timing when you really need control, especially up north. That's about when we start to see real activity, maybe 10 days before harvest, 14 days. It becomes very critical to keep them from building too quickly and just building, period. You don't want to let them get out of hand. And I think pyrethroids longer than a 7-day interval is incredibly risky. And it's a trade-off between cost. Some of the better materials are a little more expensive, but you're taking less risk, and you have to make that decision. So thanks again to all the people that really did all this work. I am not at Trevor Nichols running spray trials. John's crew is running those. John's setting those up. It's really a lot of other people doing all this work, and I just get to present it. So thanks for your time.